Greetings, my friends. We are all interested in the Plan 9x9 podcast, for that is where you and I are going to spend the next hour of our lives. And remember, my friends, podcasts such as these are made possible by listeners like these. Jeff Williams, Jerry Green, Stephen D. Sullivan, and, of course, Roger Strail. Let us punish the guilty. Let us reward the innocent. My friends, can your hearts stand the Plan 9x9 podcast?
For the first time, we are bringing to you the full story of what happened.
What plan will you follow now?
Plan 9. It's been absolutely impossible to work through these Earth creatures. Their soul is too controlled.
Why do I get hooked up with these spook details? Monsters, graves, bodies. Oh, all right.
Well, it was covered up by the higher echelon.
I am a soldier of our planet. We did not come here as enemies. We came only with friendly intentions, to talk, to ask your aid for the whole universe. But your governments of Earth refused even to accept our existence.
Flying saucers, Captain, are still a rumor.
Now toddle off and fly your flying machine, darling. But if you see any more flying saucers, will you tell them to pick another house to buzz?
Minutes later, the police arrived at the scene.
Who found them?
The man and girl. The morgue wagon ought to be along most any time.
You get their statement?
Yeah, they're pretty scared.
Finding a mess like this ought to make anyone frightened.
You believe there are such things as flying saucers, Colonel?
Tell you one thing, if a little green man pops out at me, I'm shooting first and asking questions later.
You realize there's a government directive stating that there is no such thing as a flying saucer. You're a headstrong young man.
Those incidents in the graveyard these past few days just got me worried.
Don't like hearing noises, especially when there ain't supposed to be any. Yeah, sort of spooky-like.
Shall we talk now or wait?
Go ahead, my friend.
We are now into part 7 of the Plan 9 from Outer Space film. This is what we're calling Plan 7. This is, what minutes is this, Scott? Do you know?
You put me on the spot now.
Right.
Minutes 54 through whatever 9 minutes is from there. So we're in part 7 of all this. And we are nearing the end. We are more than halfway through the film, and Scott Morris is here with me. I'm Derek M. Koch, and we have 2 special guests this time around. Scott, would you like to introduce the lovely ladies?
I would definitely like to introduce the lovely ladies. Lovely lady number 1 is your amazing wife, Brenda.
Oh boy, listen to that.
You win.
And lovely lady number 2 is the amazingly awesome love of my life, Tracey.
Hello, everyone.
He wins again.
He does.
Oh, man. So Tracey Morris is Scott's co-host on Disney Indiana. Brenda is my occasional co-feedbacker on Monster Kid Radio. She's been on my podcast over the years quite a bit. And we thought it'd be fun to bring our definitely better halves on board to talk about Plan 9 from Outer Space this time around. Now, I know Tracey has some experience with this film. Brenda does not. In fact, she watched this clip out of context, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to get into it. But Scott, we have a question that we ask every guest, right?
Yes, we do. And before we get into this, we would like to ask the 2 ladies, as you understand, this plan that the aliens use in Plan 9 is the 9th plan. We would like to know if you guys could come up with one of the first 8 plans that they didn't use.
It's the 9th plan for what? Taking over the Earth?
For taking over a planet.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so for context for Brenda, who has only seen the opening credits of this movie, other than this clip, Plan 9 from Outer Space is their plan to reanimate the dead to take over the world. And we want to know what you think, what one of the previous 8 plans were.
Well, first of all, raising the dead to take over the Earth sounds horribly inefficient.
Okay.
So the first 8 hopefully are more efficient. Or are they just inefficient human-like species?
I think that's much more likely to be the case, that these aliens are not the brightest in the bunch.
Yet somehow they have a flying spaceship that looks suspiciously like rooms they rented somewhere.
So I'm going to say one of their original 8 plans was to mind control bunny rabbits to take over the world.
All right.
Maybe one of their first 8 plans was to destroy all the plankton in the sea and then let a slow chain of environmental catastrophe take everything down.
So we went from funny and cute and fluffy to incredibly dark.
But takes hundreds of years.
Okay.
I think I've seen Tracey's plan. Wasn't that a movie, Night of the Lepus?
Night of the Lepus.
Rated PG.
Except they didn't think to grow them in large sizes first. These were just regular sized bunny rabbits.
Regular bunnies. I was thinking bunnicula.
So the reason the plan failed is because they were just regular sized bunnies and they didn't have vampire bunnies involved. Okay. Got it.
Now, for everybody that's been listening all along, we've been asking each of our guests that question. And in the last episode, which Derek and I are going to be flying solo, we will share our thoughts of what we think one of the first 8 plans were.
So stay tuned for that. And I actually, as of this recording, just came up with what mine's going to be. Because in a previous episode, somebody kind of took ours. All right, so let's talk about this particular section of the film. Things are starting to come to a head. We've got 4 people outside the Trent house, sitting on a patio, watching very passively as Kelton is approached by somebody that Brenda described as looking an awful lot like Dracula.
He had his cape up and everything. Also, I assume Kent is Officer Achilles' Shoulders.
Kelton is, Achilles' Shoulders. Yes, that's him.
Well, ironically, isn't the costume from a Dracula production?
I don't know where the cape came from, but it's very interesting, I think, that Brenda said this because she has no context of this film at all, right? Other than the opening credits and hearing us talk about it. This character was originally played by Lugosi.
Oh, is that why there's the whole, hand up over the face thing? Because none of the other kind of zombie-ish bad guys look like that.
Yep. Early on in the film, you actually see Bela Lugosi. He unfortunately passed away during the production of this film.
Maybe even before the production of this film.
True, very true. And the story goes that Ed Wood's wife's, was it his wife's chiropractor or his chiropractor was a stand-in for Bela Lugosi.
I know somebody.
And he's wearing the same kind of outfit that Bela Lugosi was wearing, but he has to hide his face because it's not Bela Lugosi.
Oh, so they were like random vampire. We're so close to Bunnicula. I think that I think Tracey wins.
Yeah, so he's not playing a vampire. He is a reanimated corpse. He is credited in the film as the old man, I believe. He's a guy who walked into traffic at the beginning of the film because he's distraught over his dead wife, who you also saw in this clip later on.
Was she also the Elvira?
Oh, right. See, I was going to bring that up too. So that is actually a woman who called herself Vampira, who at one point sued Elvira in real life for copyright or trademark infringement, something along those lines.
Whether or not she won in court, she lost in life.
Why?
Because Elvira is the best.
Oh, well, okay. Vampira was much earlier, though, and some people would say Vampira is the best. She is one of the very first horror hosts. Very few clips of her show actually exist anymore, unfortunately, but she had quite an impact. She dated James Dean. She had one heck of a crazy life in California. She was an artist for a long time. She's unfortunately no longer with us, and I don't think she won her court case. Do you know, Scott?
I don't know for sure.
Hey there, Derek here, and I have had a chance to double check. Vampira did lose her $10 million lawsuit against Cassandra Peterson, or Elvira, and this happened back in 1989. There's that. All right, back to the show.
But yeah, she plays the old man's wife, and I don't think we ever see her alive in the film. The only time we see her is after she's been reanimated and she just wanders around the graveyard set.
How do we know that that is the old man's wife?
Don't they say that at the beginning of the film?
Yeah, early on in the film, she's resurrected because we actually attend her funeral. And they make comment that they can only get the recently dead to reanimate. Mm. So she shows up just after the funeral from early in the film.
So there was like a May-December thing going on between those two.
Sure.
Because she looks a lot younger.
A May and then a very, very late December, New Year's Eve, December. Yeah. So, as Brenda said, Officer Achilles' shoulder gets taken out by Inspector Clay, the reanimated Inspector Clay, played by
No, not Clay.
I'm sorry. What am I doing? Let me start that over.
It was by Vampire Guy.
Yeah, my bad. I only had one cup of coffee. So, yeah, Pseudo Lugosi takes out Officer Kelton while everybody watches from the Trent's back porch. He just kind of stares at him and doesn't get up to help.
Except for the police chief, because he, shoots 6 bullets into him.
That comes later.
Yeah, as Pseudo Lugosi approaches the porch so that they can all be in the same shot together, they start dumping tons of bullets into him, and even to make sure that he got all the bullets out, he gives it a good shake to make sure.
And he was still shaking his gun at the...
Yeah, the firearm safety in this movie is just non-existent.
I know I'm jumping ahead, but what was with the guy who had multiple guns to just hand around later on? He had 4 of them in his belt and he's just passing them out.
Well, I think you see him go to the trunk of the car too. And I think he pulls them out of there, which is not all that unrealistic. My dad's one of his friends was the county coroner for an Indiana county, and he was also a deputy sheriff, and he had multiple weapons in the trunk of his car.
Oh, I just wanted him to be the coroner only, yet he still had 12 guns in the back of his car. He would just pass them out, in case there's an uprising of the dead at the morgue.
In Indiana, if you're a coroner, you're also a deputy sheriff.
So he had a meat wagon full of guns in the back.
The ironic thing is my dad and him and 2 other guys went up to a cabin in Canada. Canada, firearms are illegal. So they went across the border and said, we're asked, do you have any guns in the car? And he just said no. And they drove away, and one of the other guys asked the coroner, aren't you still a deputy sheriff, and don't you have your gear in the trunk? And he's like, oh my gosh, yes I do.
Did they turn around, or did they just think, I got away with it, run?
And they went up to the cottage they went to, but then they hid all the stuff up there because they didn't want to try to go back across the border with it.
So Pseudo Lugosi approaches the porch, they dump a bunch of bullets into him, they shake the gun, and then this flying saucer, the landed saucer, shoots this beam to destroy it?
No, they don't shoot the beam, they turn the beam off.
That's right, yeah, because it's a beam that goes straight into the pituitary glands, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They turn it off, and the body collapses underneath its cape.
Wait, why did they turn it off when they're just going to try to kill him later?
In a previous episode, the 2 aliens meet the Supreme Leader, and he tells them to do this, to have one of them die in front of them to scare them.
Got it.
Dead people walking around, yeah, that's terrible, but let's spook them by making one fall in front of them and die.
We only have 3. Let's sacrifice one of them.
When the body falls down, like I said, the cape is over them. They pull the cape off, and now it's a skeleton. What do you think of that? One of them says. You got me, says the other in response. I love the dialogue in this so much. Now, they are so preoccupied by this that they all forget about Officer Achilles' shoulder, as Brenda puts it, or Officer Kelton. Oh, wait, I forgot about him. He's in all this excitement. And Kelton's there as well. So Kelton, they bring him back up, and oh boy.
Did we get him? Well, unless that bag of bones over there can reanimate.
Right?
Not out of the question these days.
It's out of the running now, I think is what one of them says, right? It's out of the running now.
Can we spend a moment to talk about the ladies' reactions?
Yes, Mrs. Trent.
When did that be? I would love to do some research. And when did that become shorthand in the movies for I'm scared to death?
Yes, but first, she kept adjusting her sweater closer and closer, like the sweater was actually bulletproof or something. She kept closing it in front of her, but then, yes, when she got really scared, she started biting her hand.
What was that, or was she chilled and she was scared? She was trying to hide herself behind the sweater.
Right. She was, yeah. That's as if that's going to help, lady. Why don't you bite your knuckle? At least that'll do nothing as well.
Yeah, well... those modern women.
Yeah, they've been doing that throughout the ages.
Modern women throughout the ages. Got it.
I love the dialogue. Ed Wood was a master at this stuff. He was a wordsmith, man. Anyway, they all decide they're going to go into the cemetery to figure out what's going to go on and what's going on. And they tell the woman that she's going to stay behind. Well, no, I'm going with you. And that's where the modern women line comes up.
But the best part is, after all of that, she's like, well, I guess there's nothing I can do when they tell her no. And she gets back in the car, but she doesn't lock the door.
And she falls asleep.
Well, she's there with Officer Kelton, who is clearly one of the best police officers on the force.
Unless you go for the shoulders.
I was going to say, clearly she doesn't know about his Achilles shoulders.
Well, she saw that before.
I know, but she was so scared.
She was so distraught from the previous scene that she was overcome by emotion and maybe she fainted. Who knows?
Yes.
My guess is the actress was just bored to tears.
Well, it's a little known fact. I don't know if you knew this, but women's knuckles are actually loaded with tryptophan. So when you start chewing on them, you just kind of pass it just... Anyway, they then start passing out the guns. Brenda brought that up earlier, and they ask Trent if he knows how to use a gun. Well, I've spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. Now, is this the first time we knew he was in the military? I can't remember in the previous segments if we've mentioned that.
I don't think it ever came up before, but it surprised me that he wasn't in the Air Force since he's a pilot now, but maybe he was a pilot in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I thought that was something, too. It'd be, let's just... Given what Ed Wood is known for scripting-wise, I'm surprised he didn't just go for the easy Air Force line, unless, who knows, whatever. They are exploring the cemetery. They get to the grave. It's Inspector Clay's grave. It's empty. It looks like somebody crawled out of it, which, of course, we know that because we saw it as an audience earlier, that the amazing Tor Johnson struggled to get out of that hole in the ground earlier. Brenda, you made a comment about that grave when we were watching it.
Well, just they had cut straight down and they had piles of dirt on the sides, and yet somehow it was all so stable that he could huck his foot up on there and do that pose, that manly pose with his knee bent at a 90-degree angle and whatever, and it didn't just collapse back into the grave.
Also, for a grave that somebody has crawled out of, it was very neatly.
Yeah, it was like straight sides and everything.
We also see Vampire wandering around the graveyard here, who, according to stories, agreed to be in this movie as long as she didn't have to talk.
Oh.
And that was after she read the script. She didn't like the script, so she said, I will do it, but I'm not saying anything.
To be fair, none of the reanimated say anything.
That's true.
That's true. That's true. Some of my favorite lines of dialogue, I think, happen at the gravesite. Look, Colonel, some things just can't happen. Look, Colonel, I'm a policeman. I just like the look, Colonel, as the start of every line of dialogue when they're talking to the cop.
Oh, we forgot another line I loved about, I've been out here so often I should take up a lease. Well, not a long one.
Yeah. So, we're talking about, or at least I've been talking about how the dialogue is just so... needs a little bit of work. That, I think, was actually pretty clever, and I like that a lot.
There is one of the look colonels I want to mention. It's, look, Colonel, I'm a policeman. I've got to deal with the facts, but I guess I'll have to go along with you. I'll bet my badge right now that we haven't seen the last of these weirdies.
Weirdies. I wrote that down, too. Weirdies. Oh, man. Inspector Clay does... apparently managed to, in some stealthy ninja moving real slow kind of way, nobody saw him get around to get to Inspector Kelton and the sleeping woman in the car. And apparently Inspector Clay, the reanimated Inspector Clay, was watching what happened earlier with Kelton because he takes him out the exact same way.
I suspect there was a memo that was sent around. If you run into Inspector Kelton, he's also known as Inspector Achilles Shoulder.
And his situational awareness is crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can sneak up on this guy easy as pie.
Especially if you're like a 300-pound Swedish wrestler. You can move so slow and
Ed, I will let you film at my house, but I need to have stealth abilities.
Well, we then go back to the spaceship, or what they call the celestial ship, and I can't remember. Is this the first time they call it a celestial ship in the movie?
I believe so. I don't remember hearing that before.
And I don't know if we hear it again either. And for whatever reason, it stood out to me this time around that they call it a celestial ship. But we're back in the ship, and Eros is there, the lead alien guy. And I can't remember the woman's name off the top of my head. Do you, Scott?
Tana. And when she sees the little crew of humans coming, she asked Eros, do we have to kill them? It would be such a waste.
And then he says, would you rather? And she says, you're always right.
And his response, of course.
But then he says, those aren't my words. Those are the words of the ruler.
Right. But, I mean, this movie, the way the women characters are treated, whether they're undead or living or alien, they're really not given a lot of agency or...
No, not in the slightest.
Which is unfortunate, but I guess...
Yeah.
That pretty much gets darn close to the end. Our four guys are outside, or our humans are outside. They find the ship. They start banging on the metal to see what it is, and nobody's ever heard metal quite like that before.
Yeah, I love the fact that they're banging on it with their guns.
Again, firearm safety non-existent.
They have so many of them. They're just disposable at this point.
I'd like to know what city this actually takes place in. Does it take place in L.A.?
Where it was filmed, or where this is supposedly happening? I think this was L.A. because there's shots in the film right after the ships take off flying over L.A. So I've always figured this was in the outskirts of L.A. somewhere.
So whatever the firearm safety rules are for this city at this time, not very good. Just hand them out. Now, earlier in the film, and Brenda didn't get to see this, I don't think, but earlier in the film, one of them's like using the gun to adjust the hat on his head. While he's doing the heroic pose.
And scratching his head, and really weird stuff.
God. I used to help my grandparents teach gun safety for like 10 years of my early life. And I'm just horrified.
Yeah, Derek, you need to show her the scenes where he's doing the stuff with the guns. If she was used to be a teacher on gun safety.
Well, to be fair, when Brenda was helping her grandparents with gun safety, really all she did, she was the one that stood at the end of the range with the apple on her head.
No.
So that was just...
Nope.
No, I will show you that because it's something, especially for trained police officers. Don't learn your gun safety from Ed Wood, I guess is what we're saying here. They eventually decide to let the humans into the ship, and the door opens, and they come wandering in, and that's the end of the scene.
Which, by the way, this 9 minutes started at a fantastic place. It felt like a break, a change or something, and ended at a fantastic place.
This was kind of a happy accident.
That's one thing that I've noticed on several of the way these 9-minute segments have fallen on quote-unquote cliffhangers. I mean, minor ones, but still.
Yeah.
It's made an interesting experience watching it this way.
And I think Scott and I will probably talk about that here at the very end of the run of the show when we tackle the last few minutes of it. But it's really interesting. Again, a happy accident or meant to be. It is planned 9 minutes. I don't know.
I wonder, would Ed Wood have something that kind of meta?
Well, we need to call the aliens back so they can revive him and we can ask him.
Oh, there we go.
He's not anywhere near recently dead, unfortunately.
They don't speak, so it would be a long game of Pictionary.
Semaphore.
We could have him make a movie about it.
There we go.
Hey, there we go. I'd like to see that. I would love to. Well, maybe I wouldn't, knowing the kind of movies he made toward the end of his life. Anyway, that's our clip. That's our segment of the film. Brenda, does this make you want to see the entire film now from start to finish? So you have context?
Not particularly.
Was it that bad?
Well, no, it wasn't bad, but I think we were just talking about this the other day. I'm just sort of over female portrayals and roles.
What do you mean by that?
Just typical. Like, I'm having trouble finding a new book in Audible, and when I look in the categories I like, it's always a woman who just lost her man to whatever various circumstance and has to go home to mom and dad to put her life together because she was so dependent on her husband. And I'm at a place where I'm worn out of female. Oh no, we don't curse on the show. Of baloney portrayals of women. And there's no strong female in this, right?
Not really.
Is there a normal female in this?
You've seen the 3 females in this movie.
3?
I'm counting Vampira.
Okay, that's true. If she doesn't say anything.
Vampira is definitely female. I've checked. I mean, I've been... Never mind.
Does she actually do anything besides just kind of wander through the frame? She doesn't attack anyone, does she?
She supposedly attacks the grave diggers, but it's done off screen.
Oh.
And you know they weren't on set the same day. You're lucky if they were on the same set at some point at all. So yeah, she doesn't really do much.
But one interesting thing that I did read is when she was filming her scenes, she actually took a bus to the studio every day, but she got into character into her outfit at home. So she rode on the buses in that outfit.
Awesome.
To be fair, in LA, that probably wouldn't stick out that much.
True. Chances are that was her own wardrobe. I would not be surprised if Ed Wood's like, hey, you want to be in this movie? Well, only if you have your own wardrobe with most people. So it's probably her own outfit.
Speaking of wardrobe, I got to ask Brenda, what do you think of the aliens' attire?
Well, I was actually enjoying the old school pokey boobs. Those,
what?
The triangle shape of the boobs, like old Laura Croft. I was enjoying that because that was a time, right, where attractive boobs were those triangle boobs.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked that. I thought the male and female outfits were appropriately similar, actually, which I thought was great. And I assumed I don't know if I can say this word, the looking thing was their gun. Was that their space gun?
Yeah, their gun did sort of kind of look like a marital aid.
Oh, boy.
What did you think, Tracy?
I kind of thought it was interesting that they are relatively unisex. I'm still trying to figure out who has the better legs, him or her. We're looking at a still shot of one of the scenes in the spaceship, and I could swear there is a coffee maker in the background.
I loved the old school science-y tools they had set up in the background. The one that kept the electricity up between the 2 wires.
The Jacob's Ladder looking thing? Yeah.
So, Tracy, are you saying Plan 9 beat Game of Thrones to the coffee scene?
Apparently so.
You know, there's been a lot of people have gone in and photoshopped that coffee cup into various scenes from various shows and movies. I want to see it photoshopped into a Plan 9 scene now. I know what I'm doing this afternoon with Photoshop. That's what I'm saying.
Right next to the coffee machine.
Yep.
So one thing I noticed, though, is it's fairly easy for her to open the internal door, but the external door, which has a bigger knob to open it, is so much more difficult to open. And I'm just thinking about, if you were developing this and you were an advanced species, why would you need a bigger, more difficult to turn knob to tell the outer door to open?
I'm going to go trying to think logically. The outer door would be heavier because it would need to be a heat shield.
But there's no way that is actually, it's not like a doorknob.
Yeah, it should be just a button they press.
Right, it's a remote unlock. But somehow it's so much more difficult. Like, do you really want to do this? We're going to make this hard so you have to think about it and really want it.
Well, it looks almost like a combination lock, the way she was twisting it left and right.
Huh.
Maybe they also wanted to make it harder to open an outside door. Maybe you were like flying through space. Right. You don't want to open it and suck everybody out.
Good point. Yeah, don't just lean on the button that opens the outer hatch.
That would be a bad button.
I think we have now just spent more time thinking about the spaceship design than Ed Wood ever did.
I would agree with that.
I am amazed by how much the There were no attempts made to hide the fact that the spaceship was just a set of rooms. Like, they didn't round any corners. Like, it's a big square, right? It's a building that's going to take off into space. There were no thoughts about aerodynamics, weak points.
When you see the ship take off, and granted it wasn't in the scene that you saw, that actually gets sucked back up into the saucer.
So that's just a deployment. Got it.
Yes, when it lands, yes.
Got it.
Yeah, there is a scene a little bit later on where you see a pie plate with a block of wood attached underneath. It's supposed to be the spaceship that represents this square room.
As it's landing, yes.
It's not really a pie plate. It's a real model, but yeah, it's what it looks like, basically, yeah.
So they could have just gone and bought a pie plate?
Well, why would they have to do that when they just go out and buy a model?
Maybe the models were cheaper than the pie plates.
You saw the movie. And I know I've said this off and on throughout the recording of this, and people who listen to me on Monster Kid Radio hear this as well. I just love the DIY nature of these films, these low-budget movies, and Ed Wood was like this DIY master, would make these incredibly entertaining, low-budget, by all rights, should not be enjoyable movies, but they're just so fun because they have this accessibility to it. Like, when I watch something like this, I feel like, all Scott and I really need is like a giant garage somewhere with some science equipment, maybe a coffee maker, and now he and I can make a movie that takes place on a flying saucer because Ed Wood did it, darn it, why can't we?
Well, the one thing that I learned while watching this film this time, which I've never noticed before, is if you look at that door inside the spaceship that they come through, it's got the rounded off corners at the top. Uh-huh. And then if you go back and you look at the early scenes of the cockpit, it's the same door.
Oh.
So basically they have the character sitting in front of that door and they have different things hanging next to it and the shower curtain, but it's the same set.
Okay, yeah, so that's, earlier we have some shots in the cockpit of the humans' airplane as they're flying around. They first see the flying saucer earlier in the movie, Brenda, and that's what he's referring to. But yeah, you're right. It is the exact same piece.
Without the shower curtain.
Right, without the shower curtain to kind of give us a break between cockpit and the rest of the ship, plane. Huh. See? We can make a movie. We know how to do that, right? We could do that.
Yes.
We should just hang up this whole podcasting thing and go make movies, Scott. What do you think?
Works for me.
All right, cool. Before we wrap up here, we're kind of getting to about the 40-ish minute mark or so of this recording. I don't know what it's going to turn into when we do the edit, but any other comments or thoughts about this section of the film from Brenda?
No, it was it seems typical of the time period, and if you for some reason really want me to watch this, I can just accept that as a reflection of the time period.
If you for some reason want me to watch this.
I really want. It can't just be want. I only have so many hours in my life, honey. And I'm trying to think, like, overall, or was there anything we missed that I saw? I'm just amazed by how well the 9 minutes are working out.
Yeah.
It's a cliffhanger to the next one.
I think you and I, honey, should dress up as Aero Santana for Halloween some year.
Ooh.
I think that'd be fun.
Brenda, if Derek ever does make you watch the rest of the movie, I would recommend watching them in these 9 minute segments, maybe over the course of 9-10 days, so you don't, so it doesn't completely destroy your will to live.
Hey, okay, hold on a minute. If you really want me to watch this, if Derek makes you watch this, what do you think's happening over here? Derek makes you watch this movie.
Brenda, blink twice if you're being held against your will.
Wait, you can't see my face.
Tracey, do you have any other final comments or thoughts about this particular section of the movie?
Actually, if I remember the movie well enough, this section is fairly pivotal. I mean, we see the revealing of the undead to the humans falling apart and being the big bag of bones, and that kind of drives them to actually go out and find what in the world's going on. Huh. That's what sends them back to the cemetery. That's what sends them to find the spaceship.
We see all three of the reanimated dead. We have almost every set in the film represented here.
I have a question. In the whole film, are there only 3 reanimated dead?
That is correct.
They're going to take over the world with 3 reanimated dead people.
That's all that Ed could hire.
It's implied that eventually they're going to do more. But yeah.
They started off small scale. This is a proof of concept.
Something tells me they're not going to prove what they wanted to prove.
One thing I would like to ask Tracey, because I know Tracey has watched this film before. Do you remember the first time that you watched it?
I am not sure. I probably saw parts of it on afternoon movies on TV. I don't know if Mystery Science Theater was...
Mystery Science Theater never covered it until they did the live shows that were simulcast through theaters.
Riff Tracks, right.
Tracks
That's true. I'm not sure. I don't remember any specifics. I was probably in high school, maybe in college, but watched it several times, and it's enjoyable to watch for kind of the reasons Derek and Scott have mentioned. It's proof that if you have an idea and you have the drive, you can make a movie. You may not make a good movie. You may think it's a better movie than what it turns out to be. But by the same time, I have to admire the fact that this movie even exists and that these people all came together and I hope gave it their best shot.
If I can ask, this is something we didn't talk about at the beginning of the show. I feel like we kind of broke the format a little bit by bringing somebody who's never seen the movie before on, and I failed to ask, for both Tracey and for Brenda, for what she's seen, do you believe this is the worst movie ever made, as so many people say?
No, I don't think so.
Have you seen worse, Brenda?
I feel like I must have during our zombie movie days.
I was going to say during our marriage. I thought I was going to say.
Let me guess, it starts with Mulva?
I was going to say that, but I don't think I ever watched that one.
No, I didn't either. We started it and then had to turn it off. What about you, Tracey?
No. Coleman Francis movies are much worse. This at least has some enjoyable moments. I adore Criswell's speeches at the beginning and end because he's just so sincere. Even if he's spouting nonsense, he is absolutely sincere about that nonsense.
And I'll definitely have to agree with you. Red Zone Cuba is a worse movie than this.
For listeners who don't know, or for Brenda's benefit, Coleman Francis, probably best known, at least to people like Scott and I, for The Beast of Yucca Flats. Which also has Stuart Johnson in it, doesn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a lot worse. I know that lately, within my circle here, there's been a lot of jokes about the movie Fun in Balloon Land. That's a much worse film than this one.
So why do people say it is?
Because there was a book that came out, was it late 70s, early 80s? Do you remember, Scott?
That time frame, I don't remember the exact year. It
was called the Golden Turkey Awards, and they went through and they talked about some of the worst movies ever, and this one comes up quite a bit.
This one was their number one worst movie.
Which just tells me they didn't see enough movies. Or, I guess to be fair though, at that point they didn't have a lot of home video options. That sort of thing.
And that book was the impetus to get me to seek this film out, and I believe the same for you, Derek.
Yeah, 1980 is when that book came out by Michael and Harry Medved. Yeah, they mentioned that. That book was what made me aware of this film, as well as a movie called The Conqueror, in which John Wayne plays Genghis Khan.
I remember reading that book back in the late 80s, and that might have been my introduction to Plan 9 as well, now that I think about it.
And apparently their Golden Turkey book also mentioned the movie Jesus Christ Superstar as being a terrible film, which I know Brenda really likes that movie. But
I grew up on that movie and that record.
Now I can just grin knowing that Plan 9 from Outer Space and Jesus Christ Superstar are talked about in the same book.
How could they possibly think that's the worst? What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's the...
No, we're not paying for copyright.
Yes, but Plan 9 also has its religious roots, too.
Oh, really?
This is true.
They got part of their financing from a group of, was it Baptist ministers?
I believe so.
And
what did those Baptist ministers think was happening with this movie?
I don't think they were completely told the right stuff. Plus, Ed Wood and several of the cast members and crew volunteered to be baptized by them to get the money for this film.
So,
no!
So Ed Wood sold his soul for movies.
Yeah, to the Baptists.
Yeah, Ed Wood may not have been a good filmmaker, but boy, he could talk people into just about anything.
It sounds like it.
And funnily enough, the events that are chronicled in Jesus Christ Superstar is actually what Plan 2 from Outer Space was.
What, to send down your only begotten son?
This is going to go into some weird, dark places. I'm going to dial it back just a little bit. No.
What if all of the books mentioned in this 1980s Turkey, whatever?
All the movies? Yeah.
Yeah, what if those are all the first 1 through 8?
Well, some of the other movies mentioned in that book are things like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, The Swarm, which is about a bunch of bees.
Maybe Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
And Ratfinka Boo Boo, which is a classic, if you ask me, but nobody ever does.
One thing I know you and I have touched on a couple of times is we have a different appreciation for this movie watching it in this format.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been different things that other people have brought up, and we'll talk about this more in the last episode, but really it's given us a different appreciation for this film, and I'm glad that we've done this. So this movie is nowhere near the worst movie ever made. It's nowhere near the worst movie I've even seen.
Yeah, I've seen a lot worse. Through the zombie podcasting that I used to do back in the day, I saw a lot worse. And just in general, I've intentionally sought out movies that have been a lot worse than this. So, how many times have all of us laughed just kind of talking about it during this recording session? I mean...
I don't think that was Ed's intent, but we are getting enjoyment from his movie.
There we go. And we're talking about it now. Let's see, this came out in 1959. How many years ago was that? Like, math is hard right now for me.
That would be 60 years.
Yeah, there you go. We're still talking about it.
And I'm sure he couldn't have imagined that.
So does this have like a cult following?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, Ed Wood definitely has a cult following. Just in general, all things Ed. The Church of Ed Wood, I think, was a thing for a long time. Don't know if it still is or not. But, yeah. Then this is pretty much the pinnacle. This is peak Ed Wood right here.
Yeah, it's probably this and Glen or Glenda are his two films that are known the best.
Huh.
Neither one of which are actually what I consider his best films. I actually prefer something other than another one to these. But
what is that one?
It's called Bride of the Monsters, my preferred favorite.
I knew you were going to say that because that's probably, I would rank that above those two movies as well.
I feel like it's the most quote-unquote real movie of the bunch. In that and we can talk about this during the last episode too a little bit, but it does feel like it's got almost all the trappings of a traditional monster movie. Whereas Plan 9 and some of the other ones do have some kind of wonky out there concepts that aren't really your traditional monster movie stuff. I don't know. And it gives Lugosi more to do.
Yeah, wrestling that octopus is amazing.
Yes! Yes, it is. Well, are you glad you did this, Brent?
Yeah, well, it's just been fun chatting with Scott and Tracey and you.
Oh, throw that in there.
Yeah, that was the bone, sorry.
When I edit this, I can make it say that you like chatting with me, and then I can change it up.
Okay, you can do that, honey. I thought it was a given, but...
Yeah, Brenda, the reason that I agreed to do this podcast, I was secretly hoping that I would get to spend time talking to you.
I can still hear you guys, right?
And of course, both of us were doing it because we got to talk to Tracey.
Aww.
Aww. I like how we started this with a bunch of awes and we're ending it with a bunch of
And
aww.
I appreciate that Derek is recording it.
I'm glad he's helping us have this conversation.
You're the facilitator, Derek.